Coach, just 9 games in, how would you kind of assess, big picture look at your defense, how you guys have played the season, where you've fallen short, where have you guys been where you've needed to be?
Yeah, this has obviously been a tale of, some highs and some lows, some things we've done really well and obviously some things we want to do better. But, we got 3 games left, and as I tell guys all the time, it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. I think we've made some strides. I think some of the younger guys have grown up, and I'm looking forward to, getting this next one Saturday.
By the stats, it looked like you tackled better against Oklahoma than you had in previous games. Players said you guys made it a bigger point of emphasis. What did you do differently that week? What do you build off with from a tackling standpoint moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, again, I like to think, we've emphasized it, since I've gotten here. We haven't gotten the fruits of our labor, obviously in a lot of games. So, you just continue to coach it, continue to coach the details, continue to put them in some situations where, they can learn from it. But, yeah, I was extremely proud of the way those guys tackled, Saturday night. And like I said, at the end of the day, hopefully we can build on it. We have to build on it, to be where we want to be, as the season comes down the backstretch.
Last season, I know you don't worry about stats too much, but last season was maybe the best defense it's been here in 20-something years. This year the number's not good. Is there any part of that, do you think there's a cycle of personnel? A lot of older players last year, you maybe got your youngest group now. Is that a cycle in personnel? If so, is that concerning or is that comforting?
Well, I mean, again, I think you hit it on the head. I couldn't tell you exactly, where we are, no different than last year. I think at the end of the day, we're coaching, we're trying to continue to get these guys better. We like our personnel. We have some really good young guys that are going to be really good players here at the University of Tennessee. We obviously haven't gotten the results, week in and week out that we desire. But at the end of the day, man, we love our guys. We're going to continue to push them, continue to put them in some situations where they can be successful. And I think that's what coaches are all about. So would we like to, be better, in some games? 1,000%, no doubt, no different than last year. We wanted to be better in some spots. But, I love these guys, and I'm excited about, the future and obviously starting Saturday.
Coach, not asking you to use it as an excuse at all, but the injuries at corner when you start the year like that, just how much does that send you scrambling to the drawing board? And is that one of the biggest differences from last year to this year?
Well, it hurts me for those guys. I mean, Ricky Gibson was primed, to have a monster year for us and build on the success he had. Obviously we talked about Jamad Tanazium, so yeah, you would love to have them, but, it just broke my heart that those guys wouldn't be able to, have the seasons that we know they were capable of having. But, a setback for one is an opportunity for another, and we like the direction that Ty Redmond is headed. He's a true freshman, has played a lot of ball around here, probably more ball than any corner as a freshman we've had, at least since I've been here. And we think the sky's the limit for him. Obviously playing in the SEC is a little bit of a challenge, but I mean, Tennessee is going to really be happy they got this kid in a couple years. And Hood's done a tremendous job, just a competitor. We love what he's brought to the table. So, yeah, we'd love to have those guys because, again, they're just great kids that, obviously are great players. But, we're happy with the guys we have, and we'll continue to push those guys to be the best versions of themselves.
Just how have you seen Idris Farouk progress throughout the year, and how do you assess what he's done over the last couple games?
Yeah, he's coming along. Idris is a kid, that did really well for us on special teams last year. Was thrust into, a starting role early this year, and he's done nothing but get better, week in and week out. He's what you're looking for as far as a kid. He's a smart kid. He's very conscientious. He wants to do things the right way. Again, he's a true sophomore who hadn't started a game in his career. But he's coming along. Like I said, I don't know exactly what the stats say, in terms of his tackles. But when I look at the tape with my eye, I know that kid's getting better, and I think his future is bright as well.
For you with this group, what's been the most challenging thing for you to kind of manage this group? Has it been the communication? Has it been just execution of simple things? What is it that's been the biggest challenge for you to continue to get this group to grow throughout the season?
Yeah, I don't know that it's a one thing. I think when you're dealing with, some inexperience, every week's a new week. Every opportunity is an opportunity for those guys to learn. Communication, I think those guys have worked really hard about it, particularly talking about the safety spot, and even your nickel, those guys, being able to communicate at a high level is extremely important. We referenced tackling earlier, not being able to tackle at the clip you want to tackle at, but the thing that I'll always, dig my feet in the ground, these guys are working at it, and as long as they continue to work, fight, and scratch, man, I'm 10 toes down with these guys. So, and that's what they've done. Those guys have come to work every day, trying to get better, working and trying to give us what we asked for. And like I said, they keep doing that. I think we'll like the results sooner than later.
Coach, I know you guys will probably do a deeper dive after the season, but just sort of as you're going through the season and watching games and you're not having the performances that you guys want as a defense, what are maybe one or two culprits that you see continuing to pop up throughout the course of the season?
Again, I think, continuing to tackle better is extremely important. Obviously you want to be better in the red zone, keep guys from scoring points. But I don't know that there's a one thing that I can say definitively. We live and die, one game at a time, and you either play good enough to win or you didn't. So we obviously didn't play good enough this last week to win. We got to play a lot better this week to, come back with a victory. So, we'll deep dive it, and figure it out and see where we need to go, how we can improve, how we can coach better, how we can play better. But right now, this is a one-game season for us, and we're doing everything we can to get ready for this one.
Coach, with Arian kind of, battling some stuff here the last few weeks, can you talk about Jaden Perlotti's progress and kind of what a luxury that is this time of year?
Yeah, we force-fed, Perlotti a ton. You guys have seen the flashes. He can run. He's long. Obviously AC's a guy that's been battle-tested, played a lot of football around here. So I think him seeing the way AC works been valuable. But I think Perlotti, different than some of the other guys I talked about, man, when you look at this kid a year from now, sheesh, when he get the weight on, continue to get stronger, another year in the system, I think this kid will be as good as some of the backers we've had here in a long time. But there's a learning curve. But I do think having, T-Lander around, Spillman, obviously AC and, Perlotti, Herman, all those guys, being able to see how those guys work and how they go about their business is going to pay dividends, in the future.
Tim, how would you assess your pass rush this season and maybe some inconsistencies at times there?
Yeah. Again, I think Josh Joseph has done some good things. When you look at Jordan, or even Caleb, those guys have kind of been the force in our pass rush. I think Don Bailey, has done some good things when he's had some chances on the edge. But, obviously, we compare a lot of it to what we did last year and the way we rushed. And, a lot of those guys were, part of that. So, we'll continue to coach it, continue to get better at it, but obviously we want to continue to grow there. All right. Thank you, guys.